Good evening. I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Round Lake Area School District Board of Education 116 on November 28th, 2022 at 7:19 p.m. If I can get started with a roll call of members, please.
Mrs. McGinley?
Here.
Mr. Francisco?
Here.
Mr. De Vera?
Here.
Miss Lee?
Here.
Mrs. Larson?
Here.
Mr. Jewell?
Here.
Mrs. Klingler?
Here.
All right, and first up is our Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, first up, we have approval of our meeting agenda. We have an agenda in front of us. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jewett, seconded by Ms. Larson. Roll call, please.
Mrs. McGinley?
Yes.
Mr. Francisco?
Yes.
Mr. De Vera?
Yes.
Miss Lee?
Yes.
Mrs. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Jewett?
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler?
Yes.
And we have an approved agenda, and first up on that is the special recognition and presentations, and we have our October Athletes of the Month.
Good evening, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here this evening to introduce head cross-country coach Kevin Brady, who will be recognizing our October Athletes of the Month, both of whom are members of the cross-country team. From the boys team, Daniel Campos, and from the girls team, Miranda Espino. Coach Brady?
Hello. So first we're going to recognize Miranda Espino. Do this. She's a sophomore at the cross country team. She's had a great season. I know we're doing October Athlete of the Month, but she had a great overall season. I would want to highlight her October accomplishments. As a sophomore, I allowed her to run down in the frost-off races for most of the year. It gives her opportunity to run against athletes her own age, and she did fantastic throughout the season. So one of the races she had in October was the Niles West Invite. She took 8th overall out of over 160 girls, which is a fantastic race. It's a really big race. There's tons of teams with unlimited number of athletes that can run in each race. So that was a really good effort for her. At the time, she got a PR of 20 minutes and 47 seconds for 3 miles. The following week, we went at the Elmwood Park Invite, where she took 8th overall out of the varsity race. So now, at the end of the season, we have everybody that's the top runners around varsity, and she was the 8th runner for Elmwood Park, and she set a personal record time of 19:59. And one of the reasons why I wanted to put her up for this award for this month was because that time is the 7th fastest time in Round Lake's high school history for girls. So it was a great accomplishment. The team is very excited because she's only a sophomore, so we're looking for even better things in the future. And so that's Miranda Espino. Okay, so next up, we got Daniel Campos. Come on down, Danny. So again, Danny was our top runner on the boys' side. He's a junior though, so he had to run varsity all season long. Same two invites that we ran. Niles West, he got 30th overall out of I think it was 268 runners. So that was a really good race for him. He got a personal best time of 16:18 for 3 miles. And the next week, I think the next week, he ran at Elmwood Park. He got 5th overall and got 16:15. So one of the things about Danny is now, based on the records that I have, which are good enough, he's 11th all time in Raleigh High School history with his 16:15. So again, being a junior, we're really excited to have him back next year and hopefully drop in the 15s and see what he can do. Also, Danny got 10th overall for the conference. He was all conference this year. So he had a great season, and we're really proud of Danny.
You could have waited till after the Exchange Club presentation like that one. All right, next up is our Round Lake Exchange Club Youth of the Month Award.
Good evening, everybody. I get the great opportunity to introduce Carolina. Carolina's been involved in many activities here, and the list is really long, but I'm going to just highlight a few of them. She's a member of our Panther crew. She's been in theater, is also the president of the National Honor Society here, and is just a fantastic student. One thing I do want to highlight is that she's currently in our community civics course and takes an active role in like changing our community, and it's really special to see that. And I've gotten to see her in action, and she definitely takes this very seriously and is really doing positive things in our community, and that definitely is a highlight for her. As principal here, I'm at a number of events, and I've seen her at pretty much every type of event we have at our school, whether that's sports, whether it's our play, whether it's you name it, she's here. She spends as much time here as I do, which is really impressive. So I got an opportunity to hear her speak at the Exchange Club meeting, and you guys are really in store for something really special with the speech she's about to give. So I'm really proud to introduce Carolina.
Pearson for that introduction.
Do you want to put this so it's not super awkward with me standing like this?
Yeah. Okay. Okay. We all have someone we look up to who we find to be very inspirational and influential. If you ask me who in the universe I truly admire, I don't need to point to celebrities or any public figure in society. I admire the person who I know the best and who knows me the best, my sister. I have 2 siblings, a younger brother and an older sister. Growing up as the 2 daughters in my family, it was presumably evident that we would be sharing almost everything, from toys to clothes and even a room. I don't remember how it started or if it was because we shared everything that we grew to share a bond. A strong bond that every parent desires in their children and their siblings. The bond that we had created allowed me to learn from my sister as I grew. I found myself wanting to do everything she did, and for the most part, I can say that because of that, she is the reason I am who I am today. When my sister and I were younger, oftentimes, if we couldn't go to sleep, we found ourselves late at night telling stories to one another. We would share some random made-up stories about pirates, and we would eventually fall asleep. As we got older, these stories at night turned into reflections about our lives. Before we went to bed every night, we would share what was happening during our days. And I was at ease knowing that I could come home and share with my sister about my day and she could do the same. I admired that she was someone who was supportive of my feelings. When my sister turned 18, she enlisted in the military. Before she had left for her training, I joked to her that I wouldn't miss her, but for those 6 months that she was gone, I would miss every day that she wasn't home. But even with distance between us, we were still supportive of one another in letters. I was always delighted to receive letters from her and to know how she was doing, and I was happy that our bond could still remain despite the distance. When she got back home from training, she became a full-time student, a full-time employee, and a part-time soldier. She is balancing so much on her plate, but she makes an effort to do the utmost in all of her goals. I watch her put all of her energy into each version of herself. With this, my admiration continues to grow. She continues to work hard and to create the best version of herself. With her charisma and dedication, she not only has an influence on me, but she also has an influence on the people around her, including most recently at her job, where she is an inspiration to others to continue to pursue her goals, and they're delighted to hear how dedicated she is in what she wants to achieve. She is a huge reason for how I was shaped into who I am and how I continue to shape myself into a better person. She paved a path for me with her growing experience that allowed me to learn about myself. She will be leaving soon in December, and I wish her the best of luck wherever she is stationed. I admire how hard she has worked and how hard she continues to work towards the goal she wishes to accomplish. I admire that she was that person that would listen to my stories when we were younger. I admire that she became my role model. I admire that I was able to learn from her. A supportive, hardworking, loving, and independent person. My sister. Thank you.
All right, next up is communications to the board, and first up on that is the kindergarten student return from Pleviac, school configurations, and I believe from Mrs. Bennett.
So we just wanted to provide an update as to where we are with the school configuration. planning to date, and next steps. So far we have met with 3 of our school's staffs, Village, Murphy, and Indian Hill. Why am I out of breath just from? Okay. And then tomorrow we have our next meeting with RLAS. And then next week we'll wrap them up at the elementary level at Beach, Plaviac, and EEC. So we're considering this our first round of communications with our elementary teams. And we'll be coming back again in the near future. So that's coming up next. The structure of these meetings has been a presentation that's been put on by Dr. Center. She's done an outstanding job defining what both models look like or could look like. And we send an email out to the staff just reminding them this is the presentation that we're going to be going over. We don't go over every slide in detail at these sessions because we want to leave enough time for staff to ask questions and to provide feedback to us. So while we're there, someone on the team is collecting all of the questions and comments that are shared, and then we're incorporating them into one document so we have everything together. From that, the next day we follow up with an email to the staff at those buildings with a link to a Google form where they can submit additional questions and comments or feedback that they might have. So again, we add all of that content into one document that we're tracking just for themes, and then we have created the Q part of the Q&A for our staff, so far categorizing them into different areas that are questions that are being asked. So following December 8th, which is our last meeting of the first round of staff meetings, we will work to finalize all of our answers to those questions that are being asked through the staff meetings and the forms that are being submitted, and then we'll release that to the staff. Some of the major themes that we've seen so far, we do still have 4 more meetings to attend, in no real particular order, but how will teachers move in either model is one of the questions that's been asked, I think, at each of the sessions so far. Who will move and how will that take place? Another area is what would the partner school model look like in action? So more details about what scheduling would look like, specials, planning, different resources that are provided during the school day. And then the last part is more functional details related to the partner school. So how would we support transition between that grade 2 and 3 students, but also staff throughout the change. And then a little bit about transportation. So how would that work with the shuttle concept that we have discussed previously. So next steps, like I said, we'll be finishing the last of the meetings for the first round with staff. We'll be finalizing the Q&A released to staff. Immediately following that December 8th meeting, we are working with RLAS leadership to create some solutions teams, basically, to address all of the questions or comments that are being addressed at these staff meetings that we've held to date. So that will be a partnership between administration and RLAS leadership throughout this process. Then we will be coming back to the staff meetings again to bring some updates related to those questions, comments, some concerns that were brought up at those initial staff meetings. So that's for staff. Next up is our plan for parents. So at this point, we have some initial meetings scheduled for December 20th and 21st with our Bilingual Parent Advisory Committee and our Parent Advisory Committee. And then we have drafted a communication for all of our families that we intend to send out by midweek, just letting them know where we are in this process. The lease is coming due, what the process has been to date, and what our next steps are for engaging our families in this process. It'll follow something similar to what we've done for staff. We'll provide multiple opportunities for parents to learn and discuss the different models that we're presenting in person meetings and virtually. And then we'll follow up again with updates along the way, but also another Q&A related more to parents and their areas of interest. And then they'll also have an opportunity to submit their questions, feedback through a similar form that we're using for staff following those sessions. All meetings will be presented in English and Spanish, of course. And that's where we are. So we have the BPAC and PAC meeting scheduled for the 20th and 21st. Our plan is to follow up immediately following winter break with the session. So we'll have those scheduled out before winter break and communicated with families, but they won't take place until after the break into January. So any questions?
Just a comment. Can I just make one last comment before the board asks questions? So if you remember, and I talked about this at a couple of meetings, our intent is, well, the board is ultimately going to decide which model we proceed with. And while we won't, and that will be, I think, if the document you look at, it's around March, April, early April, because we have to start planning. What we're going to try to do to the fullest extent possible, but we won't be able to flesh out every detail. We want you as a board, and we also want the staff and the community to clearly understand the if-then scenario. Now, there are some things, for example, I'll just say it, and this isn't like private information. Both models will require some type of boundary change. They both will. And now we are not going to run both boundary models out in detail. That is a lot of work that takes months to accomplish. But what we are going to do, for example, is before you make a decision, try to give you an idea as to which one affects more students, right, on some level. But what I wanted to share is both models, we feel we're going to do right by children. We're going to support our kids. They're going to have good experiences. But there are clearly some implications with both that not everybody might think are the best. And so I just want to be clear, because what I want to avoid to the fullest extent possible, and that's what we're working on, is the board decides to support Model A, and then afterward, in some form, staff, parents, community, well, we didn't know that this program was affected by Model A. You never told us that. So we're going to work on that, and we're going to give you, I think one of my roles specifically is to make sure you have the information to make an informed decision, and we'll implement whatever decision that is. And that, what I just framed out, is true of staff and it's true of families. The other thing that Heather and I talked about is because of work schedules with families, we know if, for example, if we visit a building, we're not going to have every parent there, but we are going to run virtual meetings covering the same information. We plan on recording those, making those available online. I don't want to be in a situation where people are communicating, and maybe rightly so, that we didn't give them an opportunity to learn about it. So I just want to be clear that that's why we're spending so much time taking the questions and building them out. That's why we're going to meet with the parent groups, so they're asking the questions. And again, we're not going to have every detail worked out before the decision made. Some of them will be done. Like, for example, I can tell you one of the big buckets, for good or bad, is how do teachers move. That's a big deal. Well, we're going to have that cleaned up and identified in both models, and the process may be the same. That's going to be done before you have to make a decision. But some of the planning will happen after we decide. That's when we would get in the weeds. For example, if there's a boundary change, this is exactly what it looks like after the decision's made. So I just wanted to provide some clarity in that. I think Heather did a great job of giving you the background. Susan's done an exceptional job of presenting. The staff has been great. Obviously, not everybody is, people have opinions, but they've been so professional, and it's been good feedback. So we're collecting it all. So anyway, I'm going to turn it over to the board now.
My question's probably redundant because you could probably already know the answer to this. I'm guessing that the way you're presenting right now to faculty by doing, school is probably similar to what you're going to do for the parents and families, school, and I don't know if there's a way to incorporate like an event or something for the kids so that if parents have to come, I mean, I love the fact that you're gonna tape them and everything for the parents who can't come. I was just, throwing that out there, because I kind of figured you were doing something like that.
Yes, I intend on looking at all the schedules that the elementaries have, different events going on over the next month or so and try to tag on to those. We found in like prior similar types of conversations, we were much more effective when we could tie in to something that was already happening at the building.
Will that include looking at events like even at the middle school and high school, as parents have children in multiple buildings?
Yes, that could be an option.
Are we going to be doing any type of like surveys, sending out surveys and getting feedback from the parents? Do we have any plans for that?
So following the different sessions that we hold with the parents, just like we have with the staff, we'll put out a form for them to submit any questions or feedback that they have.
So I just want to comment on this because this isn't, and that's a great question. I think we'll do whatever you direct us to do. I think we have to be careful about a survey that just specifically asks which model an individual wants. I'm all about feedback, transparency. We're spending a lot of time on this. My worry is that people are making that judgment that never attended a session and they don't really understand all of the background and detail in that. The other thing, and again, I say this so respectfully, we just have to be careful about that kind of thing because I worry then what happens if we have another thing? Are we going to ask people what they want? And I say that respectfully, not in the spirit of not wanting the feedback. It's really more about process and maybe setting a precedent that could be a little bit tricky. If you get in there, what if it's a curriculum issue? What if it's a staffing issue? What if it's, school colors? I mean, those are maybe bad examples. So we're not opposed to surveys, but I'm not sure if the survey should specifically say, tell us which one you want. We didn't really do that with COVID. We asked some broader questions that gave us really good feedback to give us a pulse of like what the community is saying. So again, we're not opposed to it, but I can tell you, if you think about it, we are providing people right now, and we will with parents, an opportunity to tell us whatever they want. And teachers have done it. It's just in a different format. So they have opportunities to go to the Google form, and they have. I would prefer this model. I don't like this one. Here's why. So we are getting the feedback. So I do worry about just a blanket survey. And I'm not sure, Ms. Klingo, that's what you were implying. But I just wanted to get that out there.
No, not necessarily, because I felt like with COVID, we did ask questions that were more open-ended, I think, and I think we could do that as well here. My concern is that we're presenting it almost as this is the way the admin would like to go and this is the reasons behind it. So I'm worried it would come across as though we don't want feedback. I don't want that to be the perception.
Absolutely. Here's what I can tell you. We are not presenting it that way, actually. We are basically saying, and you can look at the deck, I think it's one of the first slides, the administration is partial to one. However, we're spending the same amount of time on both models, and it's done in a non-committal way because we're not saying we're doing one. I mean, and I talked about this at the last board meeting, one of the things we don't want to do is patronize people. And because I can tell you this would happen, if we didn't have that in the presentation, and we did a presentation, and somebody asked us the question and we weren't honest about it, people would see right through that. So I will say, and the team can speak to this, we are committed to presenting both models, giving equal weight to both models, and actually talking about the pros and cons of both models. So at the end of the day, we just felt like that was the more honest approach. But like I said, there's pros and challenges with each. The bottom line is we've got to get our kids back from playback. So I'm glad you actually mentioned that because it is, I just want to say it's being presented in a neutral way.
Well, we talked about in community engagement that it would be somewhat disingenuous if we weren't honest in the way that we wanted to go. So glad, I suppose it's good that we're saying that, just, it's like a fine line. I want to make sure that everybody is able to voice their thoughts on it and feel comfortable doing that. Teachers, stakeholders, parents, so.
Well, and to be frank, since I'm giving the presentation, the bulk of the questions are about the partner school model because it's the least known, right? So when teachers are asking questions, they tend to ask about what about this thing with related to partner schools. So if you like clocked time, we might overall in a session be spending more time because there just are more questions about something that's less known to them, overall. But in general, what Dr. Mendoza is saying is true. We're presenting both models. We're, it's the same presentation you guys saw, right? With the kind of back, here's what this one looks like, here's what this one looks like. But there is a lot of curiosity about what the one looks like because they're less familiar.
Well, you can't control the dialogue, and if that's where the dialogue goes, that's good, because that means that there is a discussion about it. That's just my main concern, is I want to make sure that there is a discussion and that we are listening to like the community and what their thoughts are, so.
At this point in time, we have just about 3 full pages of questions that have been asked at just 3 meetings. And a lot of them were kind of repetitive between the 3. But I think that has been extremely helpful for the team in developing out the plan already. And we're just really at the beginning stages of this engagement process. So it has been, I feel like staff has felt very comfortable so far sharing their thoughts and their concerns and questions to date, either in person or through that form.
So the opportunities that the community will have to provide feedback, is it similar to what we're using for staff?
Yes, very similar. The in-person opportunity, virtual sessions, which we have made available to staff as well, and then that feedback form.
Is the feedback form just blank, or does it kind of have some leading questions? How is that feedback form structured?
So we ask that first they let us know if they've attended one of the sessions yet. Number 2 is, have they reviewed the presentation? And then it's open-ended. What are your questions and feedback related to the school configuration planning process?
That might be one.
For that, are we able to like maybe email the parents that also the presentation, or is that overwhelming to do? I don't know.
No, that's what will be going out this week,
Okay.
so that we're the communication is drafted. We just we're working with the team to make sure it's clear. But in there is a link, just like we did with staff, to the presentation that was given here at the board in May, so that they can see the full presentation. And then letting them know that we'll be coming back very soon with the available dates for them to come and meet with us.
Thank you.
Will this also be on our website that lets parents know as they, we have that parent section? Will there be something under there that leads them to this?
Yes, we'll put the full schedule on the regular calendar and under the resources page.
Okay, thank you.
Those are all have been great questions. So I just appreciate having the opportunity, and we will continue to come back and update you as a full board.
Mr. DeBera, Mr. Jewett, Ms. Lee, any additional questions? Perfect, thank you. All right, next up is recycle of obsolete technology equipment.
Good evening. Consistent with previous practice, tonight's communication contains the latest list of obsolete technology. Craig and his team do a great job working with our recycling partners to ensure obsolete technology is recycled appropriately. It's important to note the list contains technology that has no useful life in the district and is ready to be disposed of. As a result, this technology has no residual value. It is not worth anything on the street. Any questions? No street value, no street cred.
Hearing no questions, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next up is our monthly review of the strategic plan update. Any feedback?
Yep, so each department head is just going to briefly highlight an area this month.
So I've asked Eric to give an update on the behavior team.
Thank you. Tonight I'm going to provide an update on Theme C Goal 3, which is social emotional development focusing on behavior. So most recently I met with the behavior team to develop a vision statement and commitments that go along with that vision statement in an effort to provide a consistent response to student behavior across the district.
What does the end product look like for that?
So this vision statement is part of a behavior guidebook for the district. We spent some time cleaning up our disciplinary codes, either were redundant or didn't fit well with our equity initiative. So moving forward, this will be part of a behavior guidebook, again, to ensure consistency in our response to behavior across the district.
Do you want to ask questions now, or do you want the full team to have them all go and then you can ask questions? All right, Mary, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. We'll do securing the future with the goal 6, beginning to implement recommendations of the Grow Your Own Teacher coursework. The team is continuing to develop the plan to move to a tier-year program that will meet the requirements of the College and Career Pathways endorsement.
Heather, how many people are speaking? I don't remember. Is it Heather and then who?
What I'll highlight under community engagement is, again, the work of our Honors Community Civics course. You saw Carolina tonight, part of that team. Some of the projects that they've completed and are underway include a Veterans Day recognition video that they worked with the community on, a community closet plan development. They held an action congress at the end of October and are in the process of fundraising for the Be the Spark enrichment program that you saw a few years back that they built for funding our elementary students to participate in community enrichment opportunities.
I think those are the updates, and I can turn it over to you guys for questions.
So I did have a question because it also came up in finance as we reviewed a request from administration. This is under teaching and learning. It's theme C, social emotional development goal 1, with that being yellow in a shift. And it has some bullet points regarding a change. And then again, in the request from administration, which I'll go into further details when the finance report comes up in the shift in a software that they're using. But it talks about bullet point 3, transition district SEL role in progress.
Yeah, so that one is Susan, Dr. Centers actually created a proposal that has staffing implications on it. Certainly, I don't want to talk about that like out here, but I will be, if you recall, every December we do a mid-year. I do a mid-year update you with the team, and I'll be talking to you about that. There could be some restructuring potentially, and that's why that one is worded that way, because we no longer have the SEL coordinator. Obviously, that position assumed duties and responsibilities. Susan, Dr. Centers come up with a plan to try to absorb those in other areas, but I'll talk to you about that in closed session because it's specific people related. So,
thank you.
You're very welcome. And the other thing is, I just want to reiterate, we're still learning, like with the document, and we're trying to evolve. And I just want to make sure that, and I don't think you feel this way, but if you do, please tell me. But when we have something yellow, it doesn't mean work isn't being done, and I don't think you're implying that. Like, so for the first 2 bullet points, we have SEL expectations for classrooms. That is in place. We're monitoring and refining that. We also have implemented advisory with an SEL focus at the middle school. That is happening also. one of the things, and maybe I reverse discussion, what are the things that we aren't doing because it's yellow? I just want to highlight, it's really more the student development piece, and Dr. Center, you can comment on it. But one of the things, our goal is to build out work habits and more of the college and career readiness framework, K through 12. That's actually the student development area is the biggest area that's kind of been on hold with the change in the positions. So after December, one of two things could happen. It could stay yellow, or frankly, because this is a living, breathing document, if we took that out and actually changed the goal, then it could actually be green because we've actually modified it. But I'll wait till I speak to you in December before we make that decision. Maybe that's a little bit better way to do it. So again, we're still learning.
Any additional questions? Perfect, hearing none. Thank you very much. Next up is contracts under 1,000, and I don't believe we had any, so we can skip right over that. Which brings us to public comment. Members of the public may participate in public comment during regular board meetings by attending in person or by submitting an electronic public comment form. Please note that speakers are limited to 3 minutes of time. Electronic public comments will be accepted up until noon on the day of the scheduled regular meeting, and the public commenter will be contacted to confirm identity. Once confirmed, the electronic public comment will be provided to all board members in written form. And as always, a link to the electronic public comment form can be found online. We did not have any electronic public comment. Do we have any public comment? Mr. Cabaldo, please step up. Thank you.
Well, I'm still trying to recover from what we saw. I mean, I saw the little girl when she was little, so it broke my heart to see crying for her sister. So, but I mean, the thing is that we see the kids are coming successful. So I really like to say thank you to all of you because you guys are doing a great job. And I also came here to support my son in the volleyball club because I want them also to have a volleyball team instead of a club. So if you guys actually make the right decision to support them, I will greatly appreciate it, and I'll be there for everybody. And also the other thing that I gotta say is that the dual language at Pliviak is working great for my daughter. It's working great. I mean, the R's between my oldest sons and my daughter, they're completely different. So the program is working. We just need more time. That's, I mean, something that we gotta express that to parents that, I mean, they gotta be patient. Patience is the key. I mean, this is something new, but I saw, not in our community, but I mean, I talked to a lot of kids. So I met a high school student that, I mean, he took dual language, and I mean, his Spanish is even better than mine. So that means that the program works. Thank you.
I just want to thank you for sharing. Like, I know this is hard to believe, but we don't usually get the positive calls like at the office. So I'm just grateful that you're willing to share that some of the positive experiences you have. So thank you.
Wow.
You got me.
Wow.
You got it.
All right, next up is the Superintendent's Report. Dr. Mendoza, take it away.
Thank you, Board President Francisco and Board. The first thing on the report is just a list of donations. Schweitzer Engineering Laboratories donated $200 to Murphy. Lord of Glory Lutheran Church, school supplies, also to Murphy Elementary School. The United Way of Lake County, children's books in Spanish, donated to Ellis. Anna Zambrano, recess equipment and games to Beach School. And the United Way of Lake County, Hispanic Heritage Books to Pliviak. I'd like to formally acknowledge and recognize two Round Lake High School students, senior Abraham Palestina and Alfonso Tinajero, who's a sophomore, as they have been selected to participate in the All-State Choir as part of the Illinois Music Education Conference in January of 2023. Abraham will sing in the All-State Chorus, which is the top 10% of ILMEA District 7. And Alfonso will perform the Honors All-State Chorus, top 5% of the ILMEA District 7. They will join over 1,500 student musicians, elementary, high school band, choir, and orchestra in Peoria for a weekend of rehearsals, clinics, culminating in the All-State Festival concerts on Saturday, January 28th. Round Lake High School Choir Director Mr. Olson reports that Abraham and Alfonso are the first Round Lake High School students since 2010 to be selected for the All-State Choir. We look forward to recognizing Abraham and Alfonso at a future board meeting. I just think our fine arts is just incredible here. So I'm so pleased to see that. I have one more that wasn't on, but you should be aware, I attended a superintendent roundtable with Congressman Schneider today. I think we had about 35 superintendents from the county. I was invited to that. It was just a listening session, and I would just tell you the themes that came out of that. And I think local government, we have more impact on what we can do here in our schools. State maybe a little bit. I think some of the groups with whom I'm affiliated have some influence at the state level. Federal level, not sure, but I just appreciated the opportunity to meet with him. Obviously, he highlighted a split Congress starting after the new year. But some of the themes that the superintendents were communicating, we're experiencing here, not all. Migrant families coming into communities and which, with diversity is fantastic. Just speaking about maybe some supports that we need. Children coming from all over the world. Russia, Germany, Kazakhstan, Afghanistan, everywhere. That was one of the areas. We always talk to the federal government about the lack of IDEA funding, special ed. They have never funded special ed at the level they're supposed to. We kind of whined about that a little bit. Everybody in the room talked about the teacher shortage. It's a crisis. It's not just Illinois, it's everywhere. And I think you think of an impact schools have on communities, and that was on everybody's list, the teacher shortage. He listened, and I saw him writing, so we can talk about that. School safety, but maybe more mental health was an issue, really trying to provide support, social, emotional, mental health services for children. And believe it or not, student attendance is an issue, and it's everywhere. Coming out of COVID, we still haven't, but not just us, but every district and every type of community, especially at the high school level. But surprisingly, even at elementary, middle, just kids are missing school now more. And I think it's a result of combination of good or bad. Our kids have devices now, and they saw that they could actually do some of their work without being here, but we need them in school because that impacts social development. But also, maybe we haven't renormed coming back out of the pandemic. We're not at that level yet. So I just want you to know we're focused here on attendance. I just had a meeting with principals about 2 or 3 weeks ago. There's several things we have in place to try to address it. Interestingly, our high school is doing significantly better than neighboring high schools with attendance. And I'd like to attribute that to Principal Pearson. And frankly, the type of environment we have here, I think our kids want to come, which is great, but we're still not where we need to be. But I'm communicating that because that is literally a nationwide issue right now, is student attendance, believe it or not.
On that attendance conversation, do we think that there's an issue, maybe not necessarily an issue, but when you talk about renorming, that we may need to renorm to a different attendance level just because now we've seen the importance of not sending kids to school sick. So whereas families would have sent the kids irregardless, now there's a second and third thought about that.
Yeah, so I think that's a great point, and we don't want kids coming to school sick. I think we've all done it where prior to COVID, you power through a cold, you power through, you pop the Advil in, you got a little bit of a fever, you want to play in the game. I've never done that, but that's a really good point. And here's the thing, I think we are further along as a district than in terms of what normal is, because now, and this is good, I think about 5 years ago, the state went away from just chronic absenteeism. They went to chronic truancy. They do that. So, but they also look at chronic absenteeism, which is 10% of the school year. It's 17 days. And they're right. It doesn't matter. I've always felt it doesn't matter why you're out. You're out. Whether you're sick or you're walking the street, you're still not in school. But if you think about what our kids are able to do, we have kids who don't have great attendance, but they're doing well in their classes. And because we require all of our teachers to upload work and activities into Canvas, and it's almost like we indirectly have created a structure that enables some to be successful without physically being here every day. We have a seat time waiver. I think you know that because we're a competency-based district, but we've not taken the position, and we're not yet, that it's okay to not come to school. We are seeing, we do provide an array of services at our school: social work support, psychologist support. We have great counselors. And I am seeing, we do need kids to be interacting with each other. It's just different, and it's been a little bit slow. So again, I don't have any district data right now in front of me, but I can tell you that it's on the mind of a lot of superintendents is like student attendance. It's a thing, so.
I can also attest to the fact it's everywhere, and I would hazard to say, being in a place where we don't post everything online, it doesn't necessarily have to do with the availability of the education being online. It's some people got into the habit, and some people with different anxiety issues and whatnot, it's just easier not to go, and they fall into that bad pattern. And I've found lots and lots of programs that are just the programs have waiting lists now for school refusal now as well.
I just found out today many of the local hospitals that have beds for mental health services have been full for 2 years straight. There's no room. So, I don't know, Ms. Lee, if you see that where you are, but it's a thing. You're 100% right. So. That concludes the report. Sorry, Mr. Francisco, I went a bit long on that one.
Nope. Thank you very much for that. Any questions or follow-up? I think we already peppered them with questions, so I think we're good. All right, everybody buckle in. Next up is committee reports, Finance Committee update.
Thank you. Good evening. And first, I just want to extend Finance Committee's gratitude and patience for the board members and the community waiting as we went over about 15 minutes. So thank you for your patience. But yes, as Mr. Francisco alluded to, we have quite a full agenda. And I'll go through these in order here. It's listed on the agenda in front of you. Substitute rate increase for the 2022-2023 school year. That is on the agenda for approval this evening. Again, that is just, as you'll hear in greater detail, it's increasing the rate that we are offering our subs. We are currently at 130. Our neighbors are slightly higher, so we want to move it to 180. Also offering an incentive to our retired teachers who come here and sub, giving them a different rate, because again, we have to watch how many days they can work in the district so it doesn't affect them and us in regards to retirement. And then our long-term subs, an increase on that. We are having, as I'm sure no surprise, a hard time filling our substitutes. There are neighboring districts who have a higher rate, and they're having higher success with that. And we also are competing with the private sector job market, where teachers can get paid more as well. So we're just trying to make sure that we stay competitive in the market. Recycle of obsolete technology equipment. As you heard Mr. Kozak speak earlier, this had a list of technology that it has no street value. We have some iMacs that are 2015 and 2017 model that do have value that we could sell for resale or to receive monies back, but they want to offer these to employees in the district. It is only a quantity of 20 iMacs, just to be clear, and we would sell it to our staff at the same value that we would get from the resale. But staff is interested in purchasing these iMacs. And then, of course, they will work out what lottery system there should be for the 20 iMacs. But it would be just a return value of $3,650. Also later on the agenda this evening is the prom. It is prom season shortly, right after the holidays. So there's a contract approval for a post-prom event at Main Event in is it Schaumburg. It's a bowling alley game, like a Dave and Buster's type event. So that'll be coming. And then we have the request from our athletic director for the addition of 2 coaching stipends to add boys volleyball as an IHSA sport. This, of course, would be a new sport added to our high school. Of course, there is costs associated with adding an athletic sport to the high school. Some of it being absorbed in the athletic budget and then some local dollars. Athletic budget would be covering uniforms at a cost of about $3,000 every 3 years. And then tournament fees for IHSA events of about $1,200 to $1,500 annually. Again, that coming out of the athletics budget. And then, of course, coaching stipends, which does not come out of the athletic budget, but local dollars, which would be $18,369.52. Several questions were posed to the athletic director, of course, making sure these fees also include refs, viable gym space for other athletes. Is it competing with other athletics for these students who would then join volleyball? Definitely everything has been vetted and looking at adding this sport. And of course, we could also get in this spring with our conference, but we would be competing at a JV level, not varsity, with this inaugural year. There is, as you even heard earlier this evening, a lot of interest from these individuals to move this from a club sport to IHSA level, and the Finance Committee does support it. That'll be coming next board meeting for approval. I see some smiles out there. So. Next is Swank movie licensing contract. As you know, some of our staff does show movies for non-educational events. That does require a license. So we don't want Disney knocking on our doors saying we showed a Mickey Mouse movie or something. There is heavy fines with that. This contract would be moving us from today to the end of our fiscal year, so end of June 2023. And that would be $3,688. And then we'll look, as we do with that next fiscal year, of our contracts moving forward. You know, as we talk, we always like to use multi-year contracts with these. However, the movie licensing multi-year contract is really, really expensive. So that's something that administration will look into as we move forward. But we do need to have that licensing contract as a safety for the district because they do show movies from time to time. Next, there's a staffing request at the EEC for 1 FTE bilingual teacher and 2 FTE teaching assistants. This will come forward at the next board meeting. This is grant funded. This would be for our birth to 3-year program. So this will help us expand and cut down our waiting list of students of 36. It is a $290,000 grant, $290,000 grant. And then next we have the request, which again is also on the agenda later, for prevention initiative of FTE. Again, this is, it might have confused my notes. This is, one FTE. This is, I'm sorry, the Birth to 3 program for 3 FTE child development liaisons, and then 1 FTE secretary for the Birth to 5 program. And again, that will come forward at the next board meeting on December 5th. Again, grant funded. Next is the request for 1 FTE elementary PE teacher. Just as we have with our high school, our gym sizes are pretty large, even at the elementary school. This is a request for a floating PE teacher who would go between Murphy, Beach, and Pleviac. One of the questions that the committee poses as we're looking at the reconfiguration of the district and bringing back our Pleviac students, would we still possibly need having that floater PE teacher? Of course, depending on the outcome and what comes back from the community, which avenue we go to, that will help answer that question. Next is a branching mind contract. As I kind of alluded to earlier when we were going over the themes, I mentioned theme C around SEL, which is social and emotional learning, MTSS, which is our multi-tiered system of support. Administration has put in a request to move from Panorama to Branching Minds. This would be covered through ESSER, and I know we're not reporting out on our conference just yet, but when I was at the conference, I actually attended a session regarding SEL, MTSS, and they had spoke about Panorama and what it can or cannot do. So of course that helped in Finance Committee asking some questions into why we want to leave Panorama, because we also did sign a 3-year, multi-year contract with them. We're in over a year, so there'd be a cost. There's not a cost to get out of the contract with Panorama, but we would have an overlap between Branching Minds and Panorama. So I just want to make sure that's clear. There's no cost to get out of the contract with Panorama, but the overlap in bringing in Branching Minds and keeping Panorama, there is some overlapping costs. But as to why, and I know most of you are kind of here as you guys came into that, heard some of that conversation. You know, why are we wanting to move? So Panorama does not do MTSS. We are using Google for that. And while Google is great, it does have its limitations. So with Branching Minds, that would marry the MTSS and the SEL, bring it into one platform so we're not using Google Docs. So after much consideration and asking those questions, again, I was happy that I attended that session at the conference. It would be at a cost of $139,244. Again, it would be under grant funds. We do see the benefit in moving out of Panorama to Branching Minds, marrying those two, and that's why I'd asked under theme C, that was yellow, if in moving to this new platform, would that also help shift or move that from the yellow to the green? But as we mentioned, as Dr. Mendoza spoke to, there's some other considerations into that. But that's the point of the strategic plan. It is a living, moving, breathing document. So with bringing that into MTS, it also, and one of the things in the conference that it spoke to is the parent component. We don't currently have that, a parent component, and just like we have tutoring for our students with math, science. We don't have that. And it was confirmed with administration for SEL or MTS. We don't have that support for our parents to help their students. You know, we can tell our parents how to help them with their math, their science. We're not doing that for them currently. So they can help build that parent component for the students. So that's Branching Minds. Again, that'll come to the next board meeting. Communications Staffing Department. Again, I know most of you remained in during that. That was Mrs. Bennett, where they will they are recommending the decrease of the 1 FTE district parent liaison and the 1 FTE school translator, and making those into 2 FTEs community outreach and engagement specialists, really expanding on their role within the district. And then earlier this evening, we had Archon, who is one of our architects of record, regarding Beach Elementary. As you know, Beach Elementary, they have classrooms in the library that are open, similar to how we had with Village previously, and then we built those out to make them classrooms with complete walls and doors. We still have Beach School, who has that similar setup. Their classrooms within the library, but they don't have doors or full walls. So again, we are going to be using ESSER funds of $2.3 million to fund that construction. However, as when you start to look at construction and you look at building, things are discovered. So once we put walls up in Beach, there would be no equity with the HVAC, the heating and cooling. And as probably many of you know, in our contract with teachers, rooms have to be at a certain temperature. That is our requirement. Well, they can still meet that. It will limit the HVAC. We have our RTUs, our rooftop handlers. They're old, and our roofs are aging. That again, those are nothing new. So, looking at those costs, they did Archon propose, and I would suggest the board look at that of their recommendation of doing just the construction of those classrooms. That will be covered by the $2.3 million that has been set aside from ESSER. But we have to look at to do the rooftop handlers. That's an additional $1 million is what we're looking at. And kind of with some of the other things, you do it now or you do it later, and it's going to cost more because it will affect doing it at a later date. Bringing in the cranes and the rooftop, the curbs, all that will be affected. There's also then the fire alarm security, which Dr. Lamping again is going to look into to see. She believes she has that in her budget to cover. So I know Dr. Mendoza and administration will be looking at what can be done or what options. In speaking with the architect, if you look at the timeline for the bid cycle, they kind of have to know what option of the three we're going to go with. Are we just going to do the classrooms? Are we going to do it with the RTUs? Are we going to do it with the RTUs and the security fire alarm system? The roof. Because we couldn't make that decision tonight. Again, it's an additional, everything all together is, additional couple $1 million. How do we fund that? The architect has agreed to do the drawings based on if we were to do everything at no additional cost to the district. And if we go that way, that's great. And if not, they just remove it. Because it's too hard for us to come to them later and say, now we want to do it, because they won't be able to do the drawings in time. There is also a long lead time for RTUs. As with everything in construction, there have been some supply chain issues. But we are definitely moving forward with the construction of the 8 classrooms at the $2.3 million. So again, I hope that the board will look at the drawings that are in the Finance Committee packet, and please let us know if you have any questions regarding the drawing. Next is the district designation of NIHIP. This is just a general, this is a yearly process that we do where we have, Dr. Kibbins and Ms. Belistiotis as our NIHIP general board members. There are district designees. This is just standard protocol. And then next, bond refunding, escrow credit. Again, I know everyone was kind of walking in. As you heard, we have an additional amount of money due to some refunding of the escrow. That amount is $259,234,000. We have to April to spend that money. And as some of you heard, Dr. Lamping has an idea on how to spend that. It is a short turnaround time. Again, the administration will look into that and bring that forward to the board. Later on the agenda, Organic Life 1-year contract extension. And then Dr. Kibbins will be giving the update regarding the levy hearing. Under informational items of the early childhood playground project change orders, that is on the agenda later. And then you heard about the recycle of obsolete technology equipment. And then also later on the agenda is 2 course proposals from the high school and then elementary yearbook contracts. And that covers the finance committee. Appreciate everyone listening for that length of time.
The only thing I would add is, when is the volleyball thing coming?
Oh, no, for the board,
December
December,
5th.
the next one.
Okay, because on the
Yes.
finance, it says tonight. So.
It's not on, I don't see it on the agenda.
No, Mr. Francisco actually called me. The way it's worded in the recommendation section, the implication was that finance could decide tonight. Yeah, but it was, and I called Kurt on the same question. So our intent is to bring it next week. Yeah.
Yeah,
So.
I was gonna say, I thought I said it comes next week.
I thought that we talked about it too, but I was just rereading.
Oh,
it
you're
again.
okay, I was like, I thought I said it's the next board meeting. So, yes. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things that, just like with the substitute, which will be on there, and the finance, it says just retired teachers. We had asked, well, any retired teacher? But if you look in the board packet, it says Round Lake retired teachers. So there's a couple of things like that that's different in the finance packet, but it's different in the regular board packet. Yeah, volleyball will come next board meeting. Yeah. Any questions? I know that was a lot. Anything else to add, Mr. DeVere? All right. Thank you again for your attention.
Thank you for the detailed updates. And now, next up, we will move to some approvals.
Right. I need a motion to approve the October 31st, 2022 special board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jewett, seconded by Ms. Larson. Roll call, please.
Mrs. McGinley,
Yes.
Mr. Francisco,
Yes.
Mr. De Vera,
Abstain.
Miss Lee,
Yes.
Mrs. Larson,
Yes.
Mr. Jewett,
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler,
Abstain.
Motion carries.
I need a motion to approve the October 31st, 2022 special board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. De Vera, seconded by Mrs. Klingler. Roll call, please.
Mrs. McGinley,
Yes.
Mr. Francisco,
Yes.
Mr. De Vera,
Yes.
Miss Lee,
Yes.
Mrs. Larson,
Yes.
Mr. Jewett,
Abstain.
Mrs. Klingler,
Abstain.
Motion carries.
I need a motion to approve the third and final October 31st, 2022 special board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Francisco, seconded by Mrs. Larson. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Klingler,
Abstain.
Mr. Jewett,
Abstain.
Mrs. Larson,
Yes.
Miss Lee,
Yes.
Mr. De Vera,
Yes.
Mr. Francisco,
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley,
Yes.
Motion carries.
I need a motion to approve the November 7th, 2022 special board meeting.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Mrs. Klingler, seconded by Miss Lee. Roll call, please.
Mrs. McGinley,
Yes.
Mr. Francisco,
Yes.
Mr. De Vera,
Yes.
Miss Lee,
Yes.
Mrs. Larson,
Yes.
Mr. Jewett,
Abstain.
Mrs. Klingler,
Yes.
Motion carries.
A motion to approve the November 7th, 2022 regular board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jewett, seconded by Miss Lee. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Klingler,
Yes.
Mrs. Larson,
Yes.
Mr. De Vera,
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler,
Yes again.
Miss McGinley,
Yes.
Mr. Francisco,
Yes.
Miss Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Jewett,
Yes.
Motion carries.
I don't know if you guys are aware, but I'm kind of a big deal.
All right, we'll move on to the consent agenda. I need a motion to approve the consent agenda for the accounts payable report for $1,590,036.33. Previous motion report for $734,052.79. October 2022 treasurer's report, October 2022 P-card report, and the November 28th, 2022 employment report.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Klingler, seconded by Mr. Jewett. Roll call, please.
Mrs. McGinley,
Yes.
Mr. Francisco,
Yes.
Mr. De Vera,
Yes.
Miss Lee,
Yes.
Mrs. Larson,
Yes.
Mr. Jewett,
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler,
Yes.
Motion carries. All right, next up is new business. And for our first new business, number A is our Round Lake High School 2023 post-prom venue.
I was like, oh, it's me. So as we are moving back to normal, we are trying to bring back all of the things we did pre-COVID, which included a post-prom event. This year, we are hoping to return to main event. It's like Mr. Grady McGinley mentioned, it's kind of like a Dave and Buster's type of place. The students were wholeheartedly excited about going back to this place for a post-prom event, and ticket prices would cover the cost for the event.
I would just add, as I mentioned, it was in front of Finance Committee and reviewing the contract. As we asked previously that there's always an out clause should anything happen. Don't even want to say, but in the previous, what we had before, so that the district and nobody loses any money. And then, of course, we just wanted to confirm that the venue was closed to the public and only open for our students prior. And that is all marked in the contract.
Yes.
All right, so with that, I need a motion to approve the 2023 post-prom contract with the main event in the amount of $6,263.
So moved.
Second.
I just have one quick question. On the agenda item, the recommended action was 6263, but the dollar amount says 6264.
I just saw that because there's $2 amounts. So the dollar?
I'll have to look, I'll double check the contract. It's on the contract that's linked into the agenda. That might have just been a typo on my part. I apologize.
Hold, please. Opening contract.
Thank you.
All right, a motion to amend the motion on the floor. The new contract amount being $6,264.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Klingler, seconded by Mr. Jewett at the updated amount of 6264. Roll call, please.
Mrs. McGinley,
Yes.
Mr. Francisco,
Yes.
Mr. Tavera,
Yes.
Miss Lee,
Yes.
Mrs. Larson,
Yes.
Mr. Jewett,
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler,
Yes.
Motion carries. All right, next up, we have substitute rate increase and Mrs. Belasiotis.
Okay, thank you. So as you may recall, over the summer, we did an initial rate increase for our substitute pay. It had been a number of years, so we were trying to bring it up to where everybody else was at. As we've gotten through the year, even with those increases, we're finding that we're having a difficult time finding subs. In conversations with other districts, they've also started raising their sub rates now. So this is the reason for the requests. We're coming back to you just so that we can be competitive with the other districts in the area. And when I say other districts, because in the past we've always competed with the other districts for substitutes, but now with the private companies increasing their minimum pay and incentivizing employees, we're competing with them now too. So we just need to maintain our competitiveness in the area. Sorry. So I'm presenting a request to increase our sub rate from 130 to 180 per day, and then we're also trying to incentivize our retirees to come back and sub for us in the district. So we'd like to offer them a special retiree rate of $200 per day. It's beneficial for them to come back. They know the students, they know the district, they know the curriculum. So the learning loss there is minimal when the teachers are absent. And then we'd also like to increase our long-term substitute pay just to stay competitive with the other districts in the area to $255 per day. We're hoping that this will incentivize our current subs to take on more jobs, as well as bring in subs from other districts. One of our neighboring districts is at 175 right now, and their fill rate is about 94%. I know Grays Lake is at 150 right now. Not to say that they're not going to increase their rates as well, because as soon as we sent out our survey, they were interested in what our results were. So it's just going to keep going back and forth.
I do want to, in addition to what Ms. Belasiotis called out, is when we cannot fill a position, the internal sub rate is more anyway than what we're even proposing now. So, when we can't fill, we're actually going over what is the internal rate, 195?
It's 196 right now.
196.
So even if we raised our daily rate to 180, there would be a little bit of savings. I mean, we're paying for the subs regardless because we have to fill those positions.
Yeah,
So
and then
whether we're asking for teachers that are free or that have from free periods to sub, or we're splitting the students between multiple teachers, which isn't really a great practice.
Hearing the questions?
Is there any questions? If not, I will put the motion on the floor. I need a motion to approve the administration's recommendation for the increase to the daily, retiree, and long-term substitution compensation rates as noted in the memo.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Miss Lee, seconded by Mr. Francisco. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Klingler,
Yes.
Mrs. Larson,
Yes.
Mr. Tavera,
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley,
Yes.
Mr. Francisco,
Yes.
Miss Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Jewett,
Yes.
Motion carries. All right, next up is approval of tentative 2022 levy and hearing dates, and Dr. Gibbons.
Okay, so here we are, tentative levy for 2022. Just a reminder, the levy year is always a year behind our fiscal year. Sometimes that can be, confusing when we talk about fiscal 23,
But in levy terms, we are in levy 2022 is what we are looking at. So just a review of our levy process timeline. The Board of Education in September 19, 2022 did adopt our final budget. That's certainly important to our process. We're also asking, as we're here now on November 28th, for the Board of Education to adopt a resolution estimating our tax levy for 2022 and also set the date for the public hearing. The proposed date that I am asking the board to consider is Monday, December 19th, 2022 at 6:55 p.m. As we look at the Illinois Property Tax Code, which is very important to us this year, it states that all taxing districts must estimate their property taxes to be levied at least 20 days before the adoption of its aggregate levy, and also publish in a newspaper of general circulation a notice of the proposed increase no more than 14 days or less than 7 days of the date of the public hearing on all proposed increases. The key language here for us this evening is that aggregate levy of more than 105% or 5% of its prior year's extension. And so that needs to happen prior to the last Tuesday in December. Also keeping in mind there are some new regulations that we have this year, one being the Minority Publication Notice Act, House Bill 2412, and that states that anything that we would list regarding our levy needs to be published in a newspaper of local circulation due to our minority publication of our community. And so as we're looking at the community that qualifies, that is Round Lake Beach, and so we will be publishing our public hearing notice in addition to where we've usually posted it in the Lake County News Sun. We'll also be posting it into Puro Football newspaper. So that is the newspaper of local circulation for Round Lake Beach, but also meets the requirement of House Bill 2412 in addition to our local publication of the Lake County News Sun. Another additional piece that we are required to disclose is our cash reserve balance disclosure, and that's section 17-1.3 of the Illinois School Code. So basically that is saying that in addition to our Public Act of 102 as effective May 23rd, we are required to disclose our public hearing for the certification of the school district budget tax levy and our cash balances. Typically, our practice has been at the district, we do disclose that in our treasurer's report monthly, so we're very transparent with that, but we also need to make that a part of our levy presentation and our public hearing notification, which certainly we will do. So as we're looking at that cash balance disclosure, and this information I pulled directly from the October Treasurer's report, just because the November's Treasurer's report certainly wasn't available. As we are looking at that, we're looking at a fund balance in our general funds, $42,264,748. Also $1,107,753 in our operating funds, $983,291, $1,424,473, and our special revenue funds, $5,997,683, $4,849,730, and our debt service fund, $5,032,078, and our capital projects fund, $223,053, and also $462,359, for a grand total of our cash balance reserves of $62,345,168, and that meets the requirement as set forth with that new act. So as we get to our issue at hand, meaning that tax levy disclosure, I'm proposing to the Board of Education this evening to levy a total of $29,757,428. Again, these are tentative numbers prior to the publication as well as the public hearing. So in order to look at that $29,757,428, we're looking at our largest fund of the Ed Fund, Fund 10, $11,572,319. Operations and Maintenance, $3,945,672. Transportation Fund, $5,261,149. That would provide an opportunity for some working cash, which then could be transferred at any point to a variety of funds. $247,231. IMRF and Social Security at $2,104,058 together.
Fire prevention and safety, 300,000. Tort, 1,578,048. Special education, 2,105,049. Leasing, 515,000. We're also required to support our CEDAL special education co-op IMRF agreement extension, and that is 26,834. So as we look at how those numbers all fall out, the proposed 2022 capped levy of $29,735,094 is an increase from last year of $1,444,964.50. That is 5.10% over where we were, and so that does require us to have a truth and taxation hearing. My past practice has been that we've always done the truth and taxation hearing as a matter of transparency, as a matter of being very open with our community. However, this year, based on the proposed increase, it is required. And as a reminder, our final capped funds from 2021 extension were $28,285,629.54. So as I had shared previously, the Illinois Property Tax Code, this is where it all pulls it together, where we know what the code says, but now based on where the proposed tentative numbers are, we are required to hold that public hearing, again called Truth and Taxation. Couple of things that I just want to talk through with you, fun in my office, but also understanding kind of the levy process. So as we look at how we get to the point that we're at, the first box, taxing districts, that's us. We prepare a tentative budget. That tentative budget is brought to our local governing authority, which is you as a Board of Education, which you approved on September 19th, 2022. Now we are looking at publishing and requesting that public hearing notice for our levy, which is the fourth box over as the taxing district. And so that proposed hearing date is December 19th, 2022. We will then confer that levy pending your approval, which is the taxing district certified. And then that arrow drops down to county clerk's office. Then I work very closely with the clerk's office where they create the extensions and also start calculating tax bills and going then to the county treasurer. So just so you understand the direct correlation from our district to the county clerk and the county treasurer. Then just a couple of other, I call fun facts about our community. Round Lake parcel count. So as we look at the different tax years going back to 2019, as we look at a 5-year stint, we had 13,110 parcels. Parcels meaning taxing parcels. Those would feed then our property tax base. As we're looking at now, levy year 2022, we have 12,996. You do see a little difference between tax year 2021 and tax year 2022 for a couple of reasons. First of all, people might have adjusted their property identification numbers. They've had a couple of lots close to each other within their home. They might have combined those, so it's one tax bill, one tax number. And then the other reason is tax exempt properties. We as a district have purchased a couple of properties that were taxable, most recently the warehouse. And so with our tax exempt status, we then did take a tax roll away from the parcel count. So just wanted to explain a little bit about what that looks like. And then lastly, as we look at our overall profile history and our score, looking back from fiscal 2016 all the way to 2021, we're very solid in moving forward. We're very fiscally prudent and very proud of our work that our score, even though it's maintained recognition status, has increased by 0.10% based on our cash on hand. And that concludes our tentative levy, as well as my request for a public hearing date that is required of December 19th, 2022 at 6:55 p.m.
And just to add, I know we didn't have the full conversation in finance, but, obviously the finance committee works hand in hand with Dr. Kivens in regards to the levy. So I just wanted to just note and again, extend appreciation to Dr. Kivens, including the slides kind of outlining the levy process with the little diagram that she had, and then the parcel count. It's something that I asked Dr. Kivens, so she decided to put it as a slide. So I just wanted to thank her. Because as she mentioned, as we accumulate property, again, it takes that parcel count off. And then, as she mentioned, like if you have a couple lots and you combine it to make one tax bill. That's all we wanted to add.
Yep.
No questions. I need a motion to approve the tentative 2022 tax levy and approval of the truth in taxation public hearing with the date of Monday, December 19th, 2022 at 6:55 p.m.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jewett, seconded by Ms. Klingler. Roll call, please.
Mrs. McGinley,
Yes.
Mr. Francisco,
Yes.
Mr. De Vera,
Yes.
Miss Lee,
Yes.
Mrs. Larson,
Yes.
Mr. Jewett,
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler,
Yes.
Motion carries. All right, next up is the Prevention Initiative, FTE.
In September, we were notified that we received an additional $394,800 for the Prevention Initiative Extension Grant. This is for our Birth to 3 program. These funds will allow us to serve an additional 60 families and 70 children through the addition of 3 child development liaisons and a secretary for the Birth to 3 program. And this is the first year in a 3-year grant cycle for FY 23, 24, and 25.
Any questions?
It's not about the funding, it's about the space. Do we have the space to grow that program?
We do. It's going to be tight. We have moved sort of the space and the furniture around the Welcome Center. But for the time being, we were able to accommodate the additional FTE at the Welcome Center.
I was just going to add, this was vetted through finance. I think part of the questions, again, is always space. But remember, because this is Birth to 3, remember those students don't come to us, we go to them. So we just need to have a space for that staff to work at. So those aren't students that come into our buildings. It's staff that goes to parents' homes.
If families do come to the Welcome Center, it's one family at a time, so we're able to accommodate through our conference room and other spaces.
Right, but it's not an additional classroom we need to create or have at the ready. All right. Need a motion to approve the addition of 3.0 FTE Child Development Liaisons and 1.0 FTE Secretary to provide support and services through the Birth to 5 program, and the dollar amount of $307,452.00.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jewett, seconded by Ms. Larson. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Klingler,
Yes.
Mr. Jewett,
Yes.
Mrs. Larson,
Yes.
Miss Lee,
Yes.
Mr. De Vera,
Yes.
Mr. Francisco,
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley,
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question about that real quick? I'm sorry. So in terms of, so as I was reading everything, there's a desert. There's like that. So if that's the case, is this one step towards a larger building of that program, or what are you seeing?
It is. So the addition of these funds, allows us to serve the additional families as we indicated. But the preschool also received additional grant funds. So that lessens the number of students who are waiting on a waiting list. It increases the amount of support we can provide to families. So this and the work, the work of Ms. Jane Farragon Wilson and the work of Ms. Janie Metzger is a huge step in the right direction.
All right, next up is the EEC Playground Change Order.
So as we've had the opportunity to celebrate the playground for the EEC, when we had first come to the table, we had indicated that Birth to Three program would be awarded about $355,000, and that there would be additional $150,000 that the district would contribute. We contributed that through our capital projects fund. However, as we know, when we go into construction, there's some unforeseen items that needed to be taken care of in order to have that property and that playground have its longevity and also service our students. So those items are listed here, and just wanted to make the board aware of that and also have approval for those change orders for that well-used and enjoyed facility.
Any questions?
Well, yeah, I was just gonna add, you'll see that breakdown of the change orders, the timbers, the privacy fence. Some of that was in discussion with the village that is part of that property, which is the village of Round Lake. Some of that was through discussions with them of what they requested.
Some of it is the underground stuff was required as a result of the unforeseen. Some of that was enhancements that the grant, by extending, because we're getting more kids, we extended the fence. That was covered. The privacy was for the students. So those were enhancements we chose, but because there were grant funds available, we were able to do.
Need a motion to approve the Early Childhood Education Center Playground Project change orders in the amount of $59,311.00.
So moved.
Second.
Who was my move? Motion by Mrs. Klingler, seconded by Mr. Jewett. Roll call, please.
Mrs. McGinley,
Yes.
Mr. Francisco,
Yes.
Mr. De Vera,
Yes.
Miss Lee,
Yes.
Mrs. Larson,
Yes.
Mr. Jewett,
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler,
Yes.
Motion carries. All right, next up is the pre-authorization at the COSBA inaugural national conference for board member travel. To kind of bring everybody into the loop, we already have 3 people that have been able to schedule their time to go to the NSBA conference, which is occurring in Orlando. At the same time, well, roughly the same time, I think it's askew by a day. COSBA will be held March 31st to April 2nd in Tampa, whereas I think NSBA is March 30th to April 1st, or is or April 1st to April 3rd. It's off by a day, one side or the other.
We're back early.
Okay, whichever.
There's an overlap.
Yeah, there's a smidge of an overlap. So basically, the 2 conferences are going head to head against each other, and then they also decided they wanted to be really close to each other. So at this point, the question, what we have is, we have stated that we want to have representatives go to this as well. So the general idea would be to have 3 people potentially go to COSBA as well. And of course, we have our 3 that are going to NSBA. So the question is, for the ones who are not going to NSBA, who has availability to be able to go from March 31st until April 2nd for Tampa?
Can you remind us who is going to NSBA?
Yeah, NSBA is Kevin, Peg, and Jennifer. And I do know that there's a possibility if somebody that's not going has a desire to flip-flop with Mr. De Vera, he'd be willing to give up Orlando and he would go to Tampa if somebody wants to go to Orlando. Well, we're basically starting at the corner because, first of all, the way I'm thinking of it is, I know you just went to San Diego, and I know you did too. But at the same time, it's still a great opportunity. I have availability. I can go to Tampa on this one, and also, to be honest, with my position on Lake for the Lake Division. I probably need to go to it. So I'll hog up one of those slots, but we've got at least 2 more slots. So the question is, between you and Annette, Julie, and Scott, who has availability? That's going to be our first question. Is there somebody that can you not make it?
Can I back up just a second?
Please.
And I'm wondering, so typically we send 3 to the national conference, correct? This year we're actually sending 6.
Correct.
Is that more than we should?
That's a conversation to have. From what I'm aware, it's inside of our budget.
No, and it's mostly around budget constraints. It's not necessarily, you're right, they're 2 separate conferences-ish, but they're 2 national conferences.
Correct.
That are kind of filling a similar bucket.
So I would say from my tenure on the board, from having no budget for professional development to where we are, yes, it is. We wouldn't bring these dollar amounts forward if we didn't have it in the budget. If it's strictly a dollars question. But I think with the creation of COSBO and then NSBA still in existence, I think it leaves not just our board, but other boards in a peculiar situation. Do we attend both? Or which ones do you attend? So that's a conversation for each board to have.
Correct.
I have to change a water filter on the 31st, but I think I'm good.
So it's a no for you?
No, I think I can get it.
Okay, so now I'm sorry. I don't know. That water filter's pretty important. Okay, so I'm hearing a yes for Mr. Jewett. I know I'm in. Then I'm going to are we both,
I'm going on the New York band trip.
and when is that?
I believe we come back on the 24th, and I just don't think I could get
Okay.
more time off work.
And that's fair, and that's a fair conversation, so
I
perfect.
like New York better.
I like New York better.
Sure.
Now, my next question is, I'm stuck going to Tampa because of Lake Division. Either the 2 of you want to flip-flop to Orlando and have Mr. DeVera go to Tampa? I'm basically looking at you, Scott.
What would you prefer? I don't need. I just have a water filter.
Well, I had discussed with him, I'd rather go to Tampa, truthfully, but, all right.
Okay. Then, wow. So
We have our,
I think we have it. And again, just as a recap, the 3 that will be going to Tampa now are Ms. Negretti McGinley, Mr. DeVera, and myself. And the 3 that will be going to Orlando will be Ms. Larson, Mrs. Klingler, and Mr. Jewett.
There's 0 chaperones on that trip. I'm just saying.
You may need to look at the mirror, because I think that when you look in the mirror, that's the chaperone for that trip. Okay, so those are our 3 for each of those. We can go with the
okay,
motion.
so I need a motion to approve the Board of Education's attendance in the 2023 inaugural national conference, travel and related expenses estimated at $2,261 per attendee, and the selection of attendees going to the conference of Mr. Francisco, Mr. DeVera, and Mrs. Negretti McGinley.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Francisco, seconded by Mr. Jewett. Roll call, please.
Mrs. McGinley,
Yes.
Mr. Francisco,
Yes.
Mr. DeVera,
Yes.
Miss Lee,
Yes.
Mrs. Larson,
Yes.
Mr. Jewett,
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler,
Yes.
Motion carries. All right, next up is the conversation and motion in regards to Organic Life contract 1-year extension.
So you've heard me speak with you about recent legislation that might be pending that school districts do not need to longer take the lowest bid for food service, and that has created a lot of challenges for districts. That legislation has passed, however, our market has kind of gone through the roof. And so with that being said, the USDA, U.S. Department of Agriculture, and ISB have partnered to say, give districts the opportunity to do a 1-year extension with their current vendor, if they are pleased with their current vendor, in hopes that the market conditions, meaning pricing and labor, may calm down, so that if there is a price, a request for price that would be put out there, that those numbers wouldn't be inflated. And so in thinking about our current market conditions and thinking about our certainly very favorable relationship with our vendor, I would recommend to the board that we do approve that 1-year extension. However, if the market does calm down, and it would be favorable to not only us but our vendor to have that RFP go out and get some pricing to come back, we will watch that very closely in the spring. But at this point, it does provide at least a 1-year extension for us until June 30th of 2024.
And again, I'll just add, and I know, I think most were in attendance as we talked about organic life extension of the contract. They've been a really valuable part of our food service program.
And one of the things you had mentioned is that food prices have been very volatile. In our line of work, we're seeing very similar situations. We are starting to see some categories that are calming down a little bit. So having that played out, I think it's wise.
All right, seeing no other questions, I need a motion to approve the 1-year contract extension with Organic Life for the contract term of July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2024, as authorized by the Illinois State Board of Education and the USDA.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Klingler, seconded by Mr. Jewett. Roll call, please.
Mr. De Vera,
Yes.
Mrs. McGinley,
Yes.
Mrs. Larson,
Yes.
Mrs. Klingler,
Yes.
Mr. Jewett,
Yes.
Miss Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Francisco,
Yes. Motion carries. All right, next up is movie licensing.
Good evening. So I'm
Yeah, you're
here
not getting me to say that.
I'm here this evening to talk about Swank. Swank is a movie licensing arrangement that will cover any uses of movies outside of something that is explicitly educational. And so this is really an insurance policy to ensure that we don't get ourselves wrapped up in any copyright infringement, because that can get fairly expensive fairly quickly. And so this request is to cover the remainder of the budget year. And as we evaluate our budget next spring, we will look at whether or not the cost for the multi-year contract is in line with the potential savings. Any questions?
As I mentioned, we talked about this in finance, and just to reiterate, this is for the entire district. It's for all buildings. And this is just to take us to the end of the fiscal year. And while we always try to encourage multi-year contracts for vendors or whoever we're going to use repeatedly, as Dr. Rowley mentioned, their multi-year contract is expensive. So it doesn't necessarily behoove us to do multi-year or not. But again, administration will review that.
Hearing no additional questions.
This was a discussion item only.
Next up.
Do we play a lot of movies outside of?
Good question. You know, I'm not sure we have a strong handle on everything that happens. You know, we do have holiday parties. We do have indoor recesses. We do have they may not always just be a movie either. It may be, showing a short during indoor recess because it's too rainy. We do have PTO events that do movie nights. So I know that we have some, and I'm not sure we have a complete accounting of everything. We do strongly discourage teachers from showing movies as part of the educational day, but there are a lot of things within the school day where it may be appropriate from time to time.
All right, then next up are 2023-2024 high school course proposals.
So this is an annual event. We are bringing forward 2 courses this year. The first being sports medicine. So this is a course focused inside of the science department, allowing students to explore the careers behind being student managers, being athletic trainers, and getting involved in being physical trainers. So this will include some collaboration with the athletic department, Ms. Crone has had numerous conversations with Mr. Karolzak about how that might be a connection, and possibly long-term looking at something more in-depth related to the return of an athletic training club under the right supervision and guidance. And then the other one being a sports statistics class. This is a math course focused on using statistics in the realm of athletics. Again, another collaboration with our athletic department. Statistics and data is obviously a huge market right now, giving our students the opportunity to explore something fun in math, I think is a great opportunity. We view both of these as strong career-based education classes. We are in the process right now of reapplying for the competency-based education pilot through ISB, and we'll be bringing more about that to a later meeting. Additionally, legislation this summer requires that we start to plan for college and career pathway endorsements through ISB. So as a result, Teaching and Learning right now is really developing a long-term plan, looking at our programming and how we can create pathways and alignment in there. So it's very possible we come back in early 2023 with additional course recommendations, either for implementation in 23-24 or in 24-25. The cost overall for these 2 classes is $18,000. What is that number? $892. A big chunk of that is the required materials for sports medicine. There's a lot of manipulatives, a lot of things you have to buy up front. And then in addition, some curricular resources and curriculum writing.
I was just curious what led us to pick those specific ones.
They fit what we view as a gap in opportunities for students in providing electives within those 2 departments. And so we feel that right now those are areas where we need growth, where we see specific needs. And that's not to say we won't be coming back with more again in early next year.
But Ms. Klingler, just to clarify, and maybe this isn't what you're asking, but teachers actually have the ability to propose courses. They all do. But then they're vetted properly, and we don't necessarily accept. We only bring the ones that we feel are kind of fit what our vision is. Am I hitting
Correct.
the mark on that?
I would say the other reason is these align to competency-based education and opportunities for students to have learning experiences outside of the classroom, which has been an area of emphasis for new course proposals for us.
And I would add, because, again, this went through finance. We had the athletic type trainers program before, and that it's no longer the way that it used to run. There is, as we spoke with volleyball, having the club and now being, asking to move toward IHSA, there is a future Medical Panthers club that we have here. And this would help those students that's in this club. This would, be geared towards them to get that athletic trainer experience. It won't look like we had previously with having the students that work directly with Larry and Lorenzo, at every game, but it would give them that experience and opportunity. And they talked about doing internship for those students. So not necessarily working with our athletic trainers, but giving them internship opportunities.
And medical pathways are like a high area of interest for our students. They also can be quite expensive. This is a good opportunity for us to have, our anatomy and physiology class is a very popular class. This is a connection to that course where students would take knowledge from anatomy and physiology and they'd be able to then learn to apply it in a real world setting, which I said is kind of one of our big focuses, trying to make sure that students have those opportunities outside the classroom. But again, juggling like what's the expense versus what's the opportunity, and here's an opportunity for a medical extending kind of like some medical knowledge, medical pathway that is budgetarily, responsible.
Also keep in mind, especially on the sports medicine side, and I know Mr. Tavera knows this quite well, sports medicine programming is a huge component now at the collegiate level. And like when I was in school, the ATC and trainers, you just took classes and then you took the certification test and you could become a trainer. Now you actually have to graduate with a collegiate approved sports medicine program and your degree in that. So this actually would create that initial launching point for a lot of those students to be able to be quote unquote college ready.
Can I ask a question about the competency-based pilot? So the question just came in terms of, so when does the pilot stage go out of the pilot stage into, when can we kind of settle in that this is how we're doing it?
Yeah, so great question. We keep calling it the competency-based ed pilot because ISB still calls it the competency-based ed pilot. We applied in 2015, I think, so we've been doing it for a while now, but they still consider it a pilot program at the state level, so that's why we refer to it that way. But we are currently writing our renewal application for competency-based education. The state extended the window for another 3 years, so we're writing our renewal application and resubmitting for waivers and things like that. My goal is to have that summary to you all next week, so you can, read through what we're intending to do and where like the direction of that is and the waivers that we're looking at getting. So in fact, I spent all day doing that, so.
Well, and to reinforce though, I think for 3 years, and again, this is not a partisan comment, it's just a fact, the current administration didn't do anything with the pilot. They weren't accepting new applications, we weren't getting updates, we kind of lost touch, and frankly, our district was part of an effort through LUDA to make sure that we didn't lose what we had gotten for this. And Dr. Center and her team were part of writing a white paper. I think I shared it with you. If not, I'll get a copy. But we LUDA, took the initiative and sent that white paper to the state board. And then we kept hounding them, we as in a group of districts who were part of the pilot. And then I was fortunate enough through Dr. Center's help, I testified in front of the state when they were deciding should we extend the pilot. They needed a sample district, and several of us told our story. The state board loves it. I mean, they see a real application post high school. And they decided to extend it, which is why we had to renew. One of the differences now, which I think is good, they're going to collect some data in this window. How are we defining success? What does success look like? They're not just going to focus on like standardized test scores. I mean, they're going to take this holistic view of it. And you may not be aware, but there's going to be a new state superintendent. It's out there. She announced her retirement, and I think where this goes is going to be based on, in large part, who the new state superintendent is. We're just going to keep up the pressure because we're one of the last states in the union to implement competency-based ed, like 48th, right? I mean, we're one of what, 5 states or whatever that didn't have it?
Yeah, we're towards the end. Yeah. The 40s for sure.
I'm really excited about these course proposals as it relates to potential career pathway exploration. I think it's fabulous.
Any additional conversation on the course proposals? Hearing none, we'll next move to conversation on 22-23 elementary yearbook contracts.
So this is a renewal of the same company, same group that we worked with last year in an effort to standardize the quality of yearbook provided by the elementary schools. The amounts are listed in the memo. They're all a little bit different, but they represent the minimum amount of purchase that the school has to make. So the likelihood that the buildings actually have to pay these amounts is very small. Last year, I believe we had just a couple, and those ended up being sold on a cash basis. So this is a request to renew the same contract and ensure that our students have the opportunity to be provided with a high quality, low cost yearbook.
And I would just add this again, went through finance, and as Dr. Rowling mentioned, this has been vetted over a couple of years in trying to get a complete contract for all our elementary buildings. Obviously, we know the high school yearbook works a little different. So I know we started working on this with Mrs. Kielwitz when she was here, if you recall. So we've gotten it to hopefully a good science.
Any additional questions? Hearing none, then we will move on to positive occurrences.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead. So I went and saw the Round Lake High School put on, what is it called? We lived in the castle. We all lived in the castle. That was so good, you guys. Our kids are so talented. That show was so random, and then at the end it just went like, but it was really good. Like the kids really did a great job. So I just wanted to shout out that it was cool.
By the way, my in-laws have come to numerous, because my kids, anyway, have been in theater for many years, and their experience through many of the plays where they leave going, what the heck was that? And because the Round Lake Theater is interested in doing things that aren't necessarily they're not mainstream now, which is really cool. Is like 2 years from now, 3 years from now, we'll hear about this play, and it's like, oh, we're doing this cool play. Like, been there, done that. But I have, in terms of my positive occurrence, is on Thursday, Thanksgiving morning, the Round Lake Exchange Club facilitated a senior pie drive, and it is really cool. Happened again Thursday. About 600 seniors end up getting homemade, mostly piece of pie delivered to their residence, whether it's a residential building or whatever, all throughout the Round Lake area community, and it's really cool. It's been an annual event, and is a blast. So yes. So I'm just really grateful for the school opening its doors to be able to make something like that happen. So it happens right outside Ellis, or it happened in the cafeteria at Ellis again this year. So it was very cool.
Well, I'll throw one out. Thank you to Mr. Jewett. We had the ability, I was able to come and help out with the distribution on the Wednesday before, no, it was the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. The food distribution at McGee, and it went incredibly well. We got a lot of food delivered. It was just a great atmosphere. And again, thank you to the organization there. Thank you for allowing us to participate in that, because that's a great event, and definitely one that I'm looking forward to trying to replicate on a yearly basis, especially that day before Thanksgiving kind of deal. I'm sure that's not the easiest one for you to fill, but at the same time, I'm sure the need that's probably one of the bigger need ones. So definitely thank you for allowing me to be a part of that. I'll also throw out there, we all had a great time at III and learned a lot from that as well. I'll use this as a point to make sure that you're putting together your notes, and then go ahead and start sending in your notes to Yanira so that we can put them together for probably, what do you say, the first January one? Give everybody some time to put it together. So our first meeting in January will be when we want to have those recaps available to publicly. Let's talk about what we were able to gain from that. And then I'll throw out my athletics, constant harping. Freshman wrestling was in Rockford on Saturday. Great job there. And then all of our levels were spread out across it feels like we were spread out across the state between the girls wrestling in one place. Varsity was down at Conant. And then JV was in Rockford as well. But great job with all the levels there. A lot of great, I don't have the list unfortunately, but a lot of great finishers for both varsity and also our girls team as well. Had a ton of great finishes. And then it's the second match, that was really the second matches. The whole season started off with a single event down in Conant High School back on Tuesday of last week as well. So that's getting started, and funny thing is everybody's sick because, hey, everybody's starting to hang out and be around each other. So guess what's popping up? But it's great to see and great to be around. And I'll throw out there as well the shameless plug. We've got Winter Spectacular coming up here very, very soon. Make sure if you want to see it, you better order some tickets because I know they're flying fast. So.
Right. I'm going to expand on the Winter Spectacular. They're also looking for volunteers. So while I have tickets to attend, I also have signed up to volunteer. They really are in need of volunteers. So if you can see the show and volunteer, please do so. And then just to, again, expand on the Tri-I Conference, again, I just appreciate that the board attends and, we get to, go and learn. And then just a thank you to Yanira and the administration for the organization of the conference for us, our stay, and making sure that our conference is, attended without any incident. And then, cheerleading competition is underway. They have their first competition in Johnsburg on the 18th. And I hear the football team is going to support them this year. So I'm very excited to see the football players there to support the cheerleaders. And then girls basketball has their first home game on December 2nd. So hopefully see people there as well.
One last thing about the III, I wanted to thank the admin because there were actually several things that we attended that I saw the admin in also. So I was appreciative of that. I just thought it's good that you guys go, and I appreciate the relationship we have.
I'm excited to share a positive occurrence. I would be remiss if I didn't introduce Christine Kenyon to you this evening. Christine has been sitting next to Craig Albers, and today is her first day as the district's audio video specialist. As such, she will be a regular participant in these meetings, and she'll be streaming them in the future. At some point, when she gets up to speed, she'll be the only one here. So Craig sees this as a really positive occurrence. In all seriousness, I just want to introduce her briefly. Christine has been part of our team now since April, I believe. She's a former graduate of Round Lake High School and wanted to come back and serve. She brought a great skill set to our team, a positive attitude, and as you know, this position's been needed in our district for a number of years. Not only will she be part of streaming the board meetings, but she'll also be involved in promotion, graduation, all the audiovisual assets the district is invested in, and she'll become a resident expert. So appreciate you in supporting the position. I can't think of anybody better to fill this position. Thank you.
Hearing no additional positive occurrences, then we'll step into future agenda items. All right, hearing none, we'll move on. All right, so next up will be convening in closed session. I need a motion to convene in closed session as permitted by statute 5 ILCS 120/2 for the purpose of discussing the following: real estate matters 5 ILCS 120/2 C5, litigation 5 ILCS 120/2 C11, and closed meeting minutes 5 ILCS 120/2 C21.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Ms. Lee, seconded by Mrs. Klingler. Roll call, please.
Mrs. McGinley,
Yes.
Mr. Francisco,
Yes.
Mr. De Vera,
Yes.
Miss Lee,
Yes.
Mrs. Larson,
Yes.
Mr. Jewett,
Yes.
Mrs. Klinger.
Yes.
All right, that will take us into closed session, which will end our live session for this evening. Thank you all for attending online, for those that did attend in person until they were told to leave. But again, thank you, and we look forward to speaking to you all again next week, as our next meeting is a week from today on December the 5th. Have a great evening, everyone.